top 5 press handstand mistakes and how to avoid them. Let's get into it. Actually, before we do that, please do me a huge favor and hit like and press subscribe to this channel. I'll be posting videos on this channel a few times a month, so chances are if you're watching this, there'll be something that you can benefit from. So hit like and subscribe. All right, now let's really get into it. Mistake number 1, starting your press handstand training at the hardest possible point. A lot of beginners will tend to train the press starting from the floor, which is by far the hardest place to start. The reality is, most beginners lack the strength and technique to even lift their feet an inch off the floor, let alone press all the way up. Pressing all the way up will just seem like an impossible task in the beginning. So what I like to do with my students is to build strength and technique incrementally. Knowing that starting from the floor will be the hardest, then it just makes sense to start from a higher place, right? For example, you can use a bench or some other platform that's higher than the floor. Ideally, something around hip height would be good, and you're not overloading your shoulders and wrists from the beginning and sending your body into a shock. This is when we can slowly build that necessary strength progressively and let your body adapt at the same time. After you're proficient at the platform that's about hip height, then perhaps you can upgrade into a stepping stool, and after that you can move on to yoga blocks. The point is, the lower to the floor, the harder it will be and the more it will mimic the real press itself. The idea is progression. Progression is always your friend when you train handstands, so use it. So that would be the first mistake. Do not start from the floor. Mistake number 2, not meeting the flexibility requirements. Have you ever played the video games where you can gain XP, experience points in certain traits? Let's say attack, defense, etc. Well, in pressing, if you can gain a lot of XP in 1 or 2 areas, flexibility has to be one of them, if not the most important one. And strength also helps too. Being flexible and having mobility in your hamstrings is one of the fastest ways you can learn the press. Why? Because it means you don't have to lean so far forward in the beginning to free up your feet. This will be a huge advantage because this is a little hack to bypass the shoulder planche, which most people will need, including myself. And that's the place where you will need the most strength. So don't skip stretching, have a flexibility routine and stretch your hamstrings and pancake routinely. Flexibility is a must in hand balancing, so don't think you can bypass it with just strength alone. Efficiency and consistency is the key. Mistake number 3, leaning too much or leaning not enough. That initial forward lean in the press is one of the first things you'll need to do in order to take your feet off the ground. And it's quite tricky because if you lean too much, you'll tumble forward. If you don't lean enough, you won't get your feet off the floor and you'll feel super heavy. So getting that initial lean just right is the way to go. And one of the first ways to train that is the forward walks and in reverse. Essentially, you're leaning forward enough so that your feet gets a little bit of a lift, but not necessarily going all the way up. You want your body to recognize how much lean is enough and remember that feeling. Because I can tell you right now, this forward lean and freeing the feet off the floor will be the most problematic thing you'll encounter in the beginning because it costs a lot of energy. If you do too much, it'll just drain you and you can't even lift up because you have 0 energy left. And if you don't do enough, you won't even come off the floor and you'll feel like the timing is completely off. If you do the forward walks and even train presses on the blocks, you can simply isolate the leaning part and solely focus on the timing and feeling of the right weight placement. Once you have a pretty good idea of how much is enough, then lifting the feet all the way up wouldn't be that much harder. You'll just need compression. Mistake number 4, not activating compression strength and kicking the floor with your tippy toes. So all that talk earlier about the forward lean, but what happens after that? When your weight has shifted from your feet all the way to your hands and now your feet are off the ground, this is the time to really activate your compression and pull your legs into your hip sockets, and essentially you want to think about shortening your legs. The compression is useful here because it keeps your hips tight and stacked as much as possible, and it can even give you more power to your legs that you're trying to lift up. The more compressed your lower body is, the more you can roll your lower body forward and stack on top of your shoulders. But if you don't have any compression, you'll feel the feet being very loose and it'll be hard to control that position. So with that being said, you want to activate your compression as soon as possible, even before your feet leaves the floor, because then you can gradually increase the bite and slowly lean forward and carry your hips up and forward. But what a lot of people tend to do here is to tippy toe and completely neglect the compression part. Point your feet, lift your heels, compress, and pull your legs up into your hips while you lean, and the entire process should blend into each other and not simply tippy toe and try your luck. And our last and final mistake number 5, having your shoulders still plunged on your way up. So now that you've leaned forward, had enough compression, and brought your legs up past the horizontal plane, but it still feels very heavy. Why is that? This is probably the most common mistake I see among people that can already kind of press, is that their shoulders won't fully go vertical and stay in the planche range even when their legs are up in the air and connected together into the straight line. This happens mainly because you had to planche a little bit or a lot depending on your hamstring flexibility in order to lift up. So now your body basically kept using that strength mode position and kept using it even though it no longer needs to. Also, when you transition from a total strength mode to a more of a balanced style of handstanding, it can feel like you absolutely have no grip or anything tangible to hold on to. And this can be scary, so that's why you're still holding on to that planche. So the obvious answer will be to open your shoulders into a vertical position as soon as you can. So when is that? That's usually when you have your legs in horizontal plane and parallel to the floor. To do this, you need to push your hips forward over your shoulders so that your hips, shoulders, and feet can form a triangle, sort of like a tuck. If your shoulders and hips are occupying the same line, then it will be super heavy and eventually your shoulders will collapse. So now that your shoulders are vertical, you can lift the feet up and your hips can join the midline as well. So all this might sound super confusing right now, and that's okay. To simplify the process, you can try to do press negatives. So simply lower down into a straddle from a straight line and slow it down as much as you can with everything in reverse. So we start with feet together, open the legs, hips go forward and feet back. Compression has already started, and then we compress even more and pull the legs into the hip sockets. Try to compress and lower the legs as much as you can without letting the shoulders planche all the way until the last moment. If you do this in reverse, it is pretty much exactly the way you want to press up. Just try it out and get familiar with this process and the route and the right technique of the press. If you have any other mistakes that you catch yourself doing while training the press, please let me know in the comments and I'll try to help you out as much as I can. As always, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that like button. Right now, I do have a couple slots for online coaching, so if anybody's interested, please hit up my website below for more information. See you guys next time. Have a great one.